Hey there, so glad you're here. This is Reddit Stories Podcast. Relax, you're safe here. Here's our first story. Karen stole my Big Mac when I went to the bathroom, but I got revenge. So something ridiculous happened to me yesterday, and I honestly can't believe I'm even typing this. I've had bad customer service, I've had cold fries, I've had mix-ups in orders, but until yesterday, I had never had my Big Mac stolen right out from under me. I had a long day at work and decided to treat myself on the way home. Nothing fancy, just McDonald's. Comfort food. I ordered a Big Mac meal, grabbed my tray, and sat down to eat inside. Normally, I'd just head home, but I wanted a quiet moment to myself. Right before I dug in, I realized I should run to the restroom. I figured it would only take a minute, so I left my tray on the table. Rookie mistake. When I came back less than a minute later, my fries and drink were still sitting there exactly as I left them. But the Big Mac was gone. Completely gone. My first thought was that maybe I was losing it. Did I somehow forget to grab it at the counter? But no, I remembered setting it on the tray, plain as day. I was standing there staring at my tray, trying to process what had just happened, when I noticed an older woman sitting nearby waving me over. She didn't say anything at first, just pointed across the room with this look on her face like, "Yep, I saw the whole thing." So I looked where she was pointing, a mom with 2 kids, sitting at a table that had been covered in nothing but empty wrappers and cups when I passed them earlier. But now, she was halfway through a Big Mac. I walked over and asked politely, "Excuse me, did you take my Big Mac?" She looked me straight in the eye, didn't even flinch and said, "No, this is mine. I already had it." Her tone was so confident, I almost second-guessed myself. Almost. Before I could respond, the older woman actually got up and walked over. She said, "Don't lie. I watched you walk over to his table, grab it, and sit back down here. You stole his Big Mac." Karen's face instantly went red. Instead of admitting it, she doubled down. "Are you serious? You're accusing a mother with kids of stealing food? That's disgusting. You should be ashamed of yourselves." She even told her kids loudly, "See, this is how people treat us when we're just trying to eat." Now other people were turning their heads, watching the scene unfold. I stayed calm and told her again, "Look, I don't want a scene. Just give me my food back." She snapped, "It's just a burger. Stop harassing me." That's when an employee came over to see what was going on. The older woman explained what she saw. Karen kept insisting, "This is mine. I had it all along." But the employee said that they could review the cameras if needed. You could practically see Karen's bravado drain away at the mention of cameras. Her story suddenly changed. "Okay, maybe I grabbed it by mistake, but my kids were hungry, and you can just get another one. What's the big deal?" The manager came out at this point, clearly not in the mood. She told Karen, "Taking food off another customer's tray is not acceptable. You need to leave." Karen laughed in her face. "You're going to throw me out over a burger? Please, I'll be calling corporate about this harassment." The manager didn't even blink. She said, "You can call whoever you want, but right now you are trespassing. Leave, or I'll call the police." Karen realized she was cornered. She grabbed her kids, muttering loudly about how everyone was against her, and stormed out. The kids looked embarrassed more than anything, like this wasn't their first rodeo. Once she was gone, the manager turned to me, apologized, and told the staff to make me a fresh meal. She even threw in an apple pie for the trouble. As I finally sat down to eat, the older woman gave me a little nod like, "Glad I said something." Honestly, the food was good. But the real satisfaction was watching an entire McDonald's full of people silently witness Karen's downfall. She walked in like she could do whatever she wanted, and she walked out banned from the restaurant. The wild part? She tried to steal a burger right in front of her kids and then pretended to be the victim. If she thought teaching them that kind of behavior was okay, then maybe getting caught in public was the wake-up call that she needed. I'll never look at a Big Mac the same way again. Imagine being so bold that you snatch someone else's Big Mac in a restaurant full of customers. Bold? That's just embarrassing. If you're gonna steal, at least don't do it under 100 security cameras. True, and if you do, don't forget, there's always an old lady somewhere ready to blow the whistle. So never mess with a man's Big Mac. That's sacred ground. Let's see how long the honeymoon lasts. This is my dad's story. Something he used to tell at family dinners with a grin every single time someone mentioned apples. It happened way back when he and my mom were newlyweds, before I was even a thought. Dad grew up during the Depression, and because nutrition wasn't exactly priority back then, he ended up with what he always called marshmallow teeth. Soft enamel, constant trips to the dentist, root canals before most people even get a cavity. So dental work was just part of his life. Not long after coming back to work from his honeymoon, he had to get a pretty big round of dental procedures done. Not one appointment either. This was multiple trips to the dentist. By the end of it, he was sore, tired, and had a mouth full of work that made eating a challenge. Now, Mom, who had just started learning the rhythm of being a wife, packed Dad's lunches every morning. He left their little apartment before the sun was even up, so she would get up early, pack a brown bag, and send him off with something he could actually chew without messing up all that dental work. Normally, Dad would just grab an apple and bite into it like everyone else at the shop. But with the dental work, that was impossible. The skins would get caught, the crunch hurt too much, so Mom started peeling them, coring them, and slicing them up so he wouldn't have to fight with his lunch. This sounds sweet and practical, right? Not to the guys Dad worked with. Dad was a master tradesman in a very skilled, very noisy trade. His crew was made up of the type of men who lived for ribbing each other. If there was even the smallest opening to tease someone, they took it and ran with it. And Dad had just gotten married, which meant he was fresh meat. Every single day, the guys had a new comment. "How's the honeymoon glow, Dave? Bet you were late this morning because you had to kiss the missus goodbye 3 times. And when Dad came in one morning, opened his lunchbox, and pulled out an apple that had been peeled, cored, and sliced neatly in a little wax paper packet, they had a field day. The worst one was this one loudmouth Dad always called the jerk when he told the story. The guy leaned over and said something like, "Look what Dave brought today. A peeled and sliced apple. Guess the honeymoon's still going strong if the wife's doing that for him." The whole shop howled with laughter. Dad could take a joke, but this one got under his skin. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was just one too many digs after weeks of constant teasing. Whatever it was, it stuck with him. That night, he came home, set his lunchbox down, and told Mom about it. He told her about the teasing, about how they wouldn't shut up about him being a newlywed, about how the apple was apparently proof that he was spoiled. And then he grinned and said, "Sue, I want to wipe this smirk off that guy's face. As long as I work there, will you keep peeling and slicing my apples? Every single day?" Mom, who was just as fiery as Dad, didn't even hesitate. She thought it was hilarious and said she'd be happy to keep it going. And she did. Every single workday for the next 2 years, Dad had a peeled, cored, and perfectly sliced apple in his lunch. Every day, he opened that lunchbox at the same table, and every day the guys looked. At first, they kept up the comments. "Wow, still getting the honeymoon treatment, huh? Bet she cuts the crust off your sandwiches too." But as the weeks turned into months, the jokes started to slow down. The jerk made a few last attempts to get a laugh at Dad's expense, but when nobody else was laughing anymore, he eventually shut up. The novelty wore off, and Dad just kept eating his neat little apple slices like it was the most normal thing in the world. 2 full years later, Dad got a new job. On his last day, he asked Mom to pack the apple exactly the same way. Lunchtime came, he sat down across from the jerk, opened the lunchbox slow, took one bite of the apple and said, "Guess my honeymoon never ended, huh?" He said the whole shop burst out laughing. Not at him this time, but at the guy who had been teasing him for 2 solid years. The jerk apparently turned red, looked down at his own lunch, and didn't say a single word. Dad always ended that story the same way, chuckling to himself and saying, "Best apple I ever ate." Rest in peace, Dad and Mom. One of my sisters, when she was newly married, used to pull all the grapes off the stem for her husband when she packed his lunch. Of course, his buddies made fun of him too, so he came home and told her not to do that, just leave them on the stem. So she did, sort of. She bought a big bunch of grapes, picked off almost all of them until there were just a few left at the very tip, then coiled that giant bare stem, with the few grapes still attached, into a baggie and put it in his lunch. He was not amused, but she thought it was hilarious. 2 years of sliced apples. That's not petty, that's commitment. The longest-running fruit-based revenge ever. My contractor coworker quit with 10 seconds notice after what our manager said about us. I spent a couple years working as a contractor in engineering, and like most contractor gigs, ours had an open-ended agreement. The paperwork said something like, "This contract is expected to last 12 months, but it may be ended at any time or extended at the company's discretion." That's just how it works. Contractors know the deal. But usually if you're performing well, they keep you. A lot of people in that industry get extended year after year and stay for a while. Our team had about 10 contractors and just one full-time employee who acted as our team lead. That full-timer was our main point of contact, our sponsor, and the person who relayed decisions from management. For the most part, it was fine. Everyone knew their role and did their job. Then, one random Wednesday at 4 p.m., we were told that 3 contractors were being let go. No warning, no heads up, just today's your last day. And because I was, in reality, the one running the team, even though I was a contractor too, they had me deliver the news. That was awkward. These people were my peers, not my subordinates. But there I was, standing at their desks, saying goodbye on behalf of management like some kind of grim reaper. After the dust settled, me and another contractor, I'll call him Mark, went to our sponsor's desk. We weren't trying to make trouble. We just asked the obvious question. Why couldn't those guys have been given at least a couple days' notice? Or even until the end of the week? Our sponsor smiled like this was the most natural question in the world and said brightly, "That's why we hire contractors, so we can cut them loose at a moment's notice whenever we want to." He was grinning, like this was some kind of a clever business hack we were all supposed to admire. He said it loud enough that a few other people heard. Mark and I just looked at each other because, wow, what a thing to say to 2 contractors who are still sitting there doing work for you. He might as well have said, "Don't get too comfortable, you're next." I kept working because what else can you do? But Mark was sharp, quiet, and very, very good at what he did. He didn't say a word to anyone, but I could tell something flipped in him that day. Within a week, he had started interviewing elsewhere. He didn't announce it and didn't complain, didn't try to warn anyone, just kept doing his work like normal. He told me privately when he got an offer and accepted. His start date was a few weeks out. During those weeks, Mark was still doing high-level project work that nobody else on the team really understood. He was documenting things here and there, but most of what he did lived in his head. Management didn't seem worried. Then came his last day. He didn't tell anyone it was coming. He didn't even tell me until that morning, and he only said, "Hey, I'm wrapping up today." I figured maybe he'd at least send a goodbye email at lunch or something. Nope. 5 p.m. rolled around, Mark stood up, grabbed his laptop, mouse, and docking station, and walked them over to our sponsor's desk. He set them down gently, smiled just as brightly as the sponsor had weeks before, and said, "Thanks for everything. Today's my last day." Our sponsor looked confused. "Wait, you're leaving?" Mark. "Yep, thanks again." And then he walked out. At about the same time, we received his short official email saying thanks for the opportunity. Today was his final day, etc. No 2 weeks notice, no transition plan, no handoff meeting. The room went quiet. Our sponsor just sat there, not saying anything. Then the emails and calls started coming in from managers asking where Mark was and who was going to finish his projects. It took our team weeks to figure out where he had left things and get everything back on track. And honestly, I can't even blame him. He would have given a notice and helped hand things over if he had been treated with a little respect. But management's smug, "we can drop you anytime" attitude came back to bite them hard. It's something I still think about whenever companies talk about flexibility. That door swings both ways. This is exactly why I always tell people the bus factor matters. If your entire operation grinds to a halt when one person quits, you don't have a business, you have a hostage situation. I worked at a factory where one guy was the only person who could run a specific machine. Management thought they were saving money by not cross-training anyone. He retired with 2 weeks' notice, and the entire plant lost production for almost a month while they scrambled to train someone from scratch. It cost way more than it would have to just train someone years earlier. So let me get this straight. The boss bragged about how fast he could drop contractors and then got mad when someone actually dropped him with no notice? Exactly. Dude basically loaded the karma gun and handed it over. If you treat people like they're disposable, don't be shocked when they leave like garbage pickup. No warning, just gone. Family tries to trick me into switching to the middle seat. This happened a couple of years ago, and even now I shake my head at how absurd it was. I was on a fully booked international flight. It was going to be 8 hours in the air, and I had resigned myself to a long but hopefully uneventful trip. It was one of those big planes, 3 seats on each side and 4 in the middle. I had scored what I considered the jackpot, an aisle seat on the side row, not too close to the bathrooms and with no one sitting next to me yet. It was one of those little wins you silently celebrate when you fly coach. Boarding was its usual chaos. People trying to fit bags into the bins that clearly wouldn't close, flight attendants doing their polite but stern, please keep moving routine. I was half zoning out, half watching the slow parade of humanity file down the aisle when a couple appeared with their toddler. The kid already looked tired and cranky, which on an 8-hour flight was a bad sign. The wife slid into the middle row next to me with the toddler. The dad stood in the aisle looking around, clearly frazzled. Then he leaned over and asked if I could switch with him so he could sit with his family. Now, I'm not against helping people sit together, but I've been burned before. I asked him what seat he had, expecting him to tell me he was in a middle seat somewhere else. But to my surprise, he said his seat was in business class. I was almost too stunned to answer. I mean, you're offering me an upgrade to business class? Absolutely, yes. I said sure, started gathering my things, and was already imagining a bigger seat, maybe a hot towel, definitely a better meal. And then, as soon as I stood up, this man pulled the switch. He said, very casually, that actually his wife wanted to go sit in business class, so could I just take her seat in the middle row next to the toddler instead? I stopped mid-reach for my bag. The math was not mathing. I thought he had just offered me a business class seat. Now he wanted me to give up my aisle seat and wedge myself between strangers, one of them a squirmy toddler, for 8 hours? And didn't he want to sit with this family? I said no, firmly. This is when he got defensive. His voice got louder, his face redder. He started going on about how I had already agreed to switch, and how it wasn't fair to his wife, who had apparently been planning to sit in business class all along. Meanwhile, people were stacking up in the aisle behind him because we were blocking traffic. At first, I tried to keep my voice calm, but he just kept pushing, accusing me of being selfish. Finally, I snapped and said something like, "Do you have any extra of whatever you're on? Because it must be strong stuff to think I'd agree to that." Probably not my most diplomatic moment, but at that point, the absurdity had crossed over into comedy. By now, a flight attendant had squeezed her way up to us. And her, "I ain't got time for this" face fully engaged. She asked what the problem was. Before I could get a word out, the guy jumped in and claimed I had agreed to take his wife's seat and was now refusing to cooperate. Thankfully, I didn't even have to argue. The passenger sitting behind me spoke up immediately and confirmed what really happened. The flight attendant's expression didn't even change as she turned to the guy and said, "Sir, may I see your ticket?" He handed it over and she told me to grab my things. Then she personally walked me to the business class cabin and showed me to his seat. Just like that, I sat down in the big, wide seat, buckled in, and had one of the most comfortable flights of my life. Legroom, free drinks, an actual meal served on a plate. Meanwhile, the couple stayed in economy with their toddler. And the best part? It took their smug little plan and blew it up in their faces. If the dad had just been honest from the start and actually wanted to switch so he could sit with his family, I would have been happy to help him out. But instead, he tried to game the system, and it backfired spectacularly. Honestly, good on you for standing your ground. This wasn't a situation where someone got separated from their child or was in genuine distress. He tried to bait and switch you into a worse seat after you agreed to move to business class. Big difference. If you'd taken that middle seat, you'd have been stuck for 8 hours next to a screaming toddler while his wife got champagne service. You handled that perfectly, especially with another passenger backing you up. I had one from New York to San Diego. She was middle and her boyfriend was middle in the other row. She tried everything to get me to give up my aisle seat. Her. Not sure how we got these seats. Maybe someone will switch. Me. Well, most people pay for these seats, so they probably won't want to. Her. He's my boyfriend. Me. Well, it's only a 5-hour flight. Her. It's his birthday weekend. Me. Thank goodness it's a 3-day weekend, so you have plenty of time to make it up. She stopped asking after that. Imagine thinking downgrade yourself to the middle seat is a reasonable request. Like, congratulations, here's a crying toddler and middle row misery. Flight attendant was probably thinking, sir, I have just enough patience to not duct tape you to that seat. And OP got business class out of it. That's the kind of happy ending that I like to see. Justice served at 35,000 feet with complimentary champagne. Am I the jerk for not telling my friends I'm technically our landlord? So I, 18 female, am very lucky to have 2 hardworking parents who are successful and love me. We aren't mega wealthy, but we are very comfortable because my parents are extremely smart financially. We own multiple houses as part of our real estate portfolio, which we rent out for extra income. I recently started college, and as a reward for working hard and getting into my dream school, my parents gifted me one of our houses near my college. I was going to inherit all of them anyway, but I really appreciated the gesture. Where I live, real estate law is a little tricky, and we would have to pay significant taxes to officially transfer the house to me, so we decided my parents would retain legal ownership for now. The house is pretty big, with 4 floors, including a fully furnished basement and a roomy attic. Since it's near my school, I decided to look for roommates so I could start earning money early. So far, I have 2 roommates who we'll call Sasha and B, who also go to my school. We've been living together for a couple of months now. They moved in around August, and we're all pretty good friends and very compatible roommates. This is where I might be the jerk. I didn't want to tell them that I own the house because I thought it might create a weird dynamic between us, and I didn't want them to view me any differently. We split the bills and rent, with me technically paying nothing. Since my father legally owns the house and we have different surnames, I took my mother's last name. They have no idea I own the house or that my dad just sends the money back to me. Sasha recently found the money my dad sent back while I was in class and told B, and they cornered me about it a few days ago. I told them everything, and they're mad at me for hiding this from them. They think I'm not only wrong for keeping it a secret, but also for making them pay rent in the first place. The mortgage on the house has already been paid off, so the rent goes entirely into my pocket. I responded by saying they shouldn't have gone through my mail in the first place and that it was illegal, which I'll admit was kind of a low blow. We weren't friends when they moved in, and the whole point of having roommates was so I could earn extra cash, so I don't see why I should let them live rent-free. Am I the jerk here? Edit. People in the comments were asking about the mail situation. Basically, whoever is home brings in all the mail and puts it on the kitchen island. B brought the mail in, but Sasha opened my mail before I got home. My dad doesn't send me straight up cash. He mails 2 checks with the amount Sasha and B paid. When Sasha saw the checks from the landlord to me with the exact amount of her and B's rent, she put 2 and 2 together and interrogated me when I got home. I don't know why she opened my mail in the first place. I've never noticed her snooping before, but maybe she has and I just didn't see. Edit 2. Yes, I know the assets aren't technically mine, but I have unlimited access to them and will inherit all of them one day. My parents have told me this directly, it's not an assumption. My parents consider them equally mine, so I consider them mine as well. I didn't earn them, I was just lucky enough to be born to amazing parents, and I'm grateful for that. Generic comment about evil landlords. OP's response. B and Sasha are not poor, and I'm not charging way above market price. If they felt the price was too steep, they could dorm, which is actually cheaper, or find a cheaper place. They're paying extra for luxury. I'm not exploiting broke college kids. Why we use checks instead of e-banking? I do all of my business online, but my dad bought a fancy custom mailbox, and he's trying, and failing, to convince my mom that it wasn't a waste. So now he likes to mail everything. I get letters instead of texts. Yes, it's ridiculous, and after this incident, we'll definitely be doing our finances online only. I maintain that I'm not mega rich. Yes, I acknowledge that I'm extremely privileged compared to most Americans, but in my mind, mega rich means people like my boyfriend's family who own actual mansions and have yachts, or celebrities and billionaires with private jets, etc. Compared to most of my friends, I'm middle class. Why I changed my last name despite being on good terms with my father. My parents are both British Indian immigrants, and my dad has a super ethnic and long, hard to pronounce last name, whereas my mom has a nice, short, and cute last name. When I apply for jobs, people will judge me based on my name, and I don't want that. My dad faced that, and I grew up in a predominantly white community, so I know people's perception of you changes based on how American you are perceived to be. Also, my mom went through labor and 9 months of pregnancy. She deserves to have her last name continued. Not the jerk. But stop saying you aren't mega wealthy. You were given a 4-story house in a college city as a graduation gift, and enough income that you can afford to live in a house like that with only 2 roommates. Your family is absolutely wealthy, and your attempts at trying to be humble make my teeth itch. I'm saying this because recognizing you are wealthy is an important part of you looking to change your viewing these sorts of interactions. Am I the jerk for not cooking all my parents' meals while they were visiting me? For context, I live with my fiance in a different country than my family. I haven't seen them in over a year, so my parents, who are 61 and 63, offered to visit me. I was beyond happy. My parents come from very humble beginnings in a third world country, and this was their first time traveling internationally. I wanted everything to go smoothly, so I made sure to arrange all their necessities. They stayed in our home for about a month with their own bedroom and bathroom. Even though we're not rich, my fiance and I tried to provide everything for them so they wouldn't have to spend money, as the currency here is 5 times stronger than their own. Our eating habits are a bit unconventional. My fiance and I have different diets and schedules, so we don't eat together. We usually go to the kitchen and grab food when we're hungry, and I explained this to my parents. I told them they were free to cook or grab anything they wanted from the kitchen. As time went on, we noticed my parents didn't seem to be eating much, so I repeatedly asked them what they wanted from the grocery store. Each time, they assured me that they were eating while I was working and everything was going fine. I even had my fiance take my dad to the store and tell him to grab anything that he wanted, but he only got a few items. This pattern continued throughout their stay. To make sure they were eating, I started taking them out for dinner almost every night after work, which really strained our budget. Still, they told me that they had a great time and they left saying they loved their stay. However, a few days later, my sister, who's 40, called me, furious. She told me my parents said they didn't have enough food to eat, that they couldn't touch anything in our fridge because they believed it was ours, and that they spent a lot of money making trips to the convenience store to buy food for themselves. I was blindsided. I had asked them multiple times if they needed anything and took their word when they said everything was fine. My sister accused me of not being attentive to their needs and said I acted like I didn't care, which left me feeling awful. I'm now worried that my parents were miserable during their stay, while I thought everything was going okay. I haven't brought this up to my fiance because he genuinely tried his best to make my parents happy, and this news would devastate him. I keep wondering if I should have done more or been more observant. What more could I have done? Did you see them go to the grocery store? OP. Yes, my dad smokes, so I thought he was going to buy cigarettes. My mom said that she liked to take walks to the park nearby, so I assumed that that's where they were going. Did you ask them if they were eating? Yes, I asked them multiple times. They assured me that they ate things like sandwiches, eggs, and pasta, and they said that they cleaned the kitchen before I could see it. Update. I finally got in touch with my mom, who's usually the more level-headed one in the family. I asked her what led to my sister's strong reaction. It turns out my sister did blow things out of proportion, but there's more to it. My mom explained that my dad, in particular, has a strong feeling of inadequacy, which I've known about but didn't expect to become a problem during their visit. Essentially, my dad didn't feel like he deserved any of the things we were doing for them, which is why he chose to buy junk food instead of eating the quality food we provided. My dad has struggled with self-esteem issues his entire life. He's very overweight, smokes, and is a functional alcoholic. My fiance and I are fitness-oriented, so we even paid for a gym membership for both of my parents. They initially said they wanted it, but my dad only went a few times. I also noticed he smoked more than usual and was buying beer every week. I think this trip brought up a lot of complicated emotions for him. My mom explained that my dad never imagined he would travel internationally, and this triggered feelings that made it hard for him to connect with us. My sister assumed I had somehow mistreated him or made him feel that way, but my mom assured me that that wasn't true. She even apologized for not talking to me sooner and regretted letting my sister get involved. It wasn't about the food, it was about my dad's internal struggles and his inferiority complex. He distanced himself because he feels like an outsider now that I've moved on from the poverty we once shared. I'm still processing all of this, and I'll probably need some therapy sessions to fully understand and cope with the situation. Thank you to everyone who read and offered advice. It's helped me make sense of things. Am I the jerk for refusing to let my sister's family live in my house after they sold theirs for a dream vacation? So I, 32 male, own a modest 3-bedroom house that I've been paying off for the last 10 years. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine and I'm proud of it. My sister, who's 29, and her husband, who's 31, are the typical free-spirited types. They've always talked about quitting the rat race and living life to the fullest, all that. Well, a few months ago, they finally did it. They sold their house during a booming market, thinking the profit would fund a year-long break to travel. They believed that they could stretch the money by traveling cheaply, staying in hostels or Airbnbs, and getting by with occasional odd jobs. At first, they stayed in nicer places and went out to eat a lot, thinking they had plenty of cushion, but within 2 months, they were out of money. They underestimated how quickly expenses would pile up, especially with 2 kids, who are 7 and 5, to feed and take care of. Now that their funds are drained, they've decided to stop full-time travel but don't want to settle down yet. Instead, they asked to live with me rent-free for the next 10 months while they figure things out. They say they'll still try to take some occasional trips if they find super cheap deals, but for the most part, they want to stay at my house. I told them no, my house isn't big enough. I don't want the disruption, and I certainly don't think it's fair for them to live off me because their plan failed. I offered to help them find an affordable rental or even cover part of their expenses for a couple of months so they could get back on their feet, but that wasn't enough. My sister blew up at me, calling me selfish and accusing me of being jealous of their adventurous lifestyle. To make it worse, my parents are siding with her, saying that family should help family and that I'm being too rigid. The thing is, my parents live in a small apartment and they can't take in my sister's family, which is probably why they're pushing her on me. They said that I don't understand the value of experiences and that I should be more supportive. Some of our mutual friends are also saying I should be more understanding, but I think it's completely unreasonable to expect me to house their whole family for nearly a year just because they didn't plan properly. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. You didn't sign up to be a hotel for your sister's impulsive decisions. Let them enjoy their dream vacation while you enjoy the peace and quiet of your own home. Picture this. Karen steals someone else's skincare products and they end up ruining her skin. That's exactly what happens in our next video, just popped up on your screen. Give it a tap with your thumb. Karen and I are already waiting for you. See you soon.